Okay, I'm logging into this master appliance that I was talking to you earlier on. This is basically a setup that we have in our labs in India, and let me explain this screen quickly and then I'll focus on Citrix delivered. The boxes that you're looking up there tell you that there are 4 applications that were auto-discovered and 6 users that were using those 4 applications. There are 4 applications that are being published using Citrix, XenApp, or Zen Desktop, and there is a 1 shared desktop with 4 users that is being published again using Citrix Zen Desktop. There are no dedicated desktops. There are 14 altogether servers in the lab that were agented, and there are 2 endpoints in the lab that were agented. And this is the summary of what when you log in the first screen. So when I click on, just before we get into the Citrix delivered, when I click on the applications, the point I wanted to make here is that everything is application centric. So if you happen to have standard applications or applications that are being delivered using the standard HTTP methods of accessing, then those applications are auto-discovered, and if you have multiple instances of those applications, they're also discovered. So if I have 2 Microsoft Exchange servers, then I'll discover both of them, the number of users that are using it. The service level basically represents the percentage of the calls that came in the last 24 hours that were responded back without being slow or without having any errors. Gives you a summary of how well your applications are behaving in a nutshell if you're looking at all the standard applications. When you go to Citrix delivered application, the Citrix delivered, you can deliver applications, you can deliver shared desktops, you can deliver dedicated desktops. So again, when I'm looking at the application, here we have Excel, Outlook, PowerShell, and the Kaisis browser that are being delivered using Citrix, and a popular Outlook. Let us look at how Outlook is being published by Citrix XenApp and how it is being used and the users that are using, because we see a user count of 4 and what is happening with the Outlook. So when I click on that particular application, what you're looking at is the host on which this application is running. If there are any other applications that are also being published on this host, the list of them, and you can navigate to any of them from here. The service level of the XenApp server, that 93% basically tells me that the pixels are being painted well by the Citrix for this application. This is the Citrix server's service level. The resource usage of the entire CPU and what this Outlook is taking, and the same thing with the memory utilization, how many concurrent sessions are there, how many users are coming in, and what is that they're exercising on in terms of CPU and memory on this particular XenApp where this application is being delivered from, and what are all the other applications that are running on this XenApp server and what is that they're consuming. Now, when I look at the let's take, because our idea is to look at an end user experience. So as we've seen earlier in the summary screen, when I showed you, Outlook had some issues, because there in the summary screen, as you can see, there were 7 critical alarms out there. So before going there, let me walk you through as to how this will help you to find out. So let's pick the users. The users basically will tell you every user that is using the applications that are being, or the images that are being delivered by Citrix infrastructure. So I chose Juan, and I'm looking that he is basically using 2 applications here, and no desktops or shared desktops are being accessed by this particular user. So and he's coming from this particular end user device. And this endpoint, since it has a link connected to it, basically tells me that there is an agent running inside that endpoint, and I can navigate to that endpoint to see what actually is happening. I'll not go there. My use case here is I want to find out what is happening with Outlook and if Juan is getting affected. So as you can see here, application, This is how much Outlook is using, the CPU and memory, and how much WAN is using on that particular Zen app accessing this Outlook application that is being published there. So user is WAN, application is Outlook I'm looking at, and this is what Citrix is reporting to me as the user session latency. And you can see that Citrix is basically telling me that user session latency is less than 2 milliseconds most of the times. However, the interesting part is the backend response time. The Outlook is now calling the Microsoft Exchange server behind it. And when it calls the Microsoft Exchange server behind it, basically how long is the Microsoft Exchange server taking to respond to WAN's request? And as you can see, there are instances here really bad when I took the 24-hour window, going all the way up to almost 115 seconds to sometimes to 11 seconds to 5 seconds. So you can see as to how the backend is not responding properly. For anybody who is in the Citrix world, if this happens, you will get a call saying that my Citrix is not working properly. Citrix is working okay here. It is the backend response time, it is the backend that is basically having issues, which means that the Microsoft Exchange server that we've seen earlier on is the issue that is basically might be having a problem. So if I look at, for this particular user, if I look at the topology of that user, you basically can see that all of this I'm showing you here is completely auto-discovered. There is nothing here that has been configured. So when I look at this particular VDI and I actually see what applications running it and what is he using in the backend, of course the Outlook is going and calling the Microsoft Exchange server in the back, and that is where, if you can look at this particular link here and click on it, you can start seeing that the response time is pretty high, and in terms of almost 74 seconds, which is almost touching the TCP/IP retransmission. So definitely there is a problem with the backend infrastructure. So let's go to the applications and look at the Microsoft Exchange server, and of course it is 96%. There are issues here. Let's click on that Microsoft Exchange server and look at what might be happening. And as you can see, the responsiveness of Microsoft Exchange server in the last 24 hours has been hovering around less than 4 seconds, which is okay, but around this period of time you actually can see that it has shot up, and you have response times going way beyond into 110 seconds, way beyond the baseline. And you can also see there were a lot of critical errors that have happened there. So when I click on the alarms, because that's basically what we're interested in knowing as to what might have happened, and in the very same time frames that we were looking where there were issues, you have 2 critical alarms. One has happened 7 times, and when I click on it, it is basically saying that the LDAP service that the exchange is using is taking a lot of time during this time period, and this sluggishness is the reason why the end user is having a problem with the experience that they're having using Outlook. When I talk about trying to find the root cause and trying to get to the point so that we can return it back to the operational state, here is where the monitoring of the dependencies of that particular application, which are auto-discovered by AppEnsure, is very important. LDAP service is a critical part of our setup there. We're using LDAP service, and there is the request to the Active Directory for whatever reason are taking longer time, and as a result my Exchange servers is having problems servicing the request that it is getting from the Outlook that is being published from Citrix Zen app servers. So the ability, this is the end-to-end visibility when we talk about, not just showing you who is playing, but how are they playing is most important. Not most of the tools, when they talk about end-to-end visibility, they're presenting to you what is there. That is only part of the problem. What is there and how is it acting is very important for you to be able to reduce drastically the mean time it takes for identifying an issue with any of your applications that you're delivering. I know that we're going to be running short on time, so I'll do a very quick there are many features of the product, and of course you're all welcome to request for a demo on our website as well, and we can give you individual demo of the product and go through a typical demo, which normally takes about 45 minutes for me to cover most of the features. But I just wanted to concentrate on one use case of how an end user getting affected because of something going wrong with the backend is important, and how AppEnsure helps you to do that. And I also want to quickly show a similar use case with a shared desktop. So when there is one shared desktop in the catalog that are being published, we have one machine that is being published, and when I click on it, I see some alarms here. When I click on that, I basically will, I'm looking at that particular shared desktop and how the memory is being used, and how the CPU is being used, and how the disk IOs are being used, and how many users are using it, and whether they're active or not, and if there are any alarms. Of course, all of the alarms that we're talking about here, everything, we have all the standard practices of JSON insertions, REST APIs, so that they can populate SNMP tabs. All of that standard features that are required for any management tool are all built into the product. Here, the reason why I quickly went into this is a particular shared desktop is deviating in its response time. And there are 3 users that we have seen that are using it, and the response time deviation is happening because this is going beyond 100%. 3 times it has happened. When I click on it, I basically will see that on that particular shared desktop, one user called Chris is actually using majority of the CPU, almost taking the CPU to 80% because of the applications that he's using inside that shared desktop, which is basically affecting the other users of that same shared desktop, which is resulting in that particular machine having a response time deviation and a poor performance for all other users but Chris. So when we talk about correlating the information, measuring the response time, bringing it back, looking at the commodity data, correlating it, and seeing how the behavior of one user or a group of users is going to be affecting the larger population. Therefore, you could better perform or better fine-tune your infrastructure. If Chris is going to be running jobs that are going to be taking that percentage, then probably he should be given a dedicated desktop rather than being part of a shared desktop. So these are the things that AppEnsure will help you resolve in perfecting your application delivery, so that you'll have end users that are consistently getting the service levels that you would wish to have in your organization.